Current Affairs.
In the special series 2025, the year of reforms, now we bring a discussion on India's rise on the world stage. The participants are Ashok Sajjanhar, former ambassador, and Professor Sanjay Kumar Bhardwaj from JNU. The moderator is Niharika, Bhuwania.
Good evening and welcome to a brand new episode of Current Affairs. You're with me, your anchor, Niharika. Now, as 2025 has given way to a brand new 2026 with new energy, we must also look back to see how far we've come. You know what they say, right? As important as it may be to look forward, it's also important to take a look backwards to see and look at the journey that we've already made. Joining me today in the studio are former Ambassador Ashok Sajjanhar and Professor Sanjay Kumar Bhardwaj, International Relations Expert from JNU. Welcome to the program, Ambassador Ashok and Professor Sanjay. It's lovely to have you with us today. And first of all, warm greetings of the new year. 2026 has already come in.
Thank you very much for having me, and thank you. Congratulations to you also and all your listeners for the new year.
Thank you very much and Happy New Year to you all.
Thank you so much. And well, I'm actually looking forward to the conversation we're about to have today, which is all about what makes the world look up to Prime Minister Modi and what all we can learn from him as a leader. First up, I would like to start with some economic growth and economic aspects that we've seen in the past few years or the past year particularly. Let's begin with the 8.2% GDP growth rate that we've seen. Results are just the tip of the iceberg, but I am sure that it has taken a lot of groundwork, it has taken a lot of background work to help us get here. Since we are talking about the GDP, let's also listen to what the Prime Minister has said on the subject.
बीते दशक में भारत ने 2 लाख करोड़ डॉलर अपनी इकोनॉमी में जोड़े हैं। जीडीपी का डबल होना सिर्फ आंकड़ों का बदलना मात्र नहीं है, इसका इम्पैक्ट देखिए। 25 करोड़ लोग गरीबी से बाहर निकले हैं और ये 25 करोड़ लोग एक नियो मिडिल क्लास का हिस्सा बने। ये नियो मिडिल क्लास एक प्रकार से नई जिंदगी शुरू कर रहा है, ये नए सपनों के साथ आगे बढ़ रहा है, हमारी इकोनॉमी में कंट्रीब्यूट कर रहा है और उसको वाइब्रेंट बना रहा है।
Professor Sanjay Kumar, very quickly, do you want to give us a glimpse of that?
There are a number of factors that India has come out with its economic policy, or you can say economic reforms. And the most important that initiatives has been taken by the Indian government is the GST reform. And that GST reforms had been instrumental to regulate the intra-state trades, in fact, in India. And I think by earning this revenue, what it had given to India as a country in this globalized phase, that it had basically attracted the investment. And what investment is looking forward the infrastructure. And I think that Indian government has come out in last few years with wonderful infrastructures. You can say the expressway, Delhi, Mumbai, Vadodara expressway, and different, even connecting with the small cities, small states from north to south and the east to west. That has become very, very, and I think this was the vision to our former Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee, that to develop these kinds of infrastructure, and Prime Minister Modi and Gadkari, they are coming out with this. Second very important contributions why Indian economy grow is because it's a young country, and you can see 60% population of India is young, and they have been the young generations with the startup programs, with the innovations, with different technologies, all the sectors like you can say science, technology, IT, defense. We are promoting startup programs, and we are basically working to have Viksit Bharat 2047. So second, this is very important factor. Third, I think what Prime Minister Narendra Modi's leadership had worked on to ensure the energy security. And this energy security that we are exploring in two ways. One is that exploring the domestic sources, and in the domestic sources, different innovative technologies and energy transitions, energy consumptions, and how you can save the energy, and basically green and clean energy. We have been transforming. We are coming with that. The second is that we are also exploring the external sources, overseas sources, to ensure the constant, uninterrupted, reasonable supply of energy to India. And there, I think our relations with Russia, we have invested in energy sectors in Russia, but we are also importing, and that has given concessional rates to import the energy. But we are also exploring this to the Southeast Asian countries, wherever the hydrocarbon potentials in all the Southeast Asian countries we are, and also the Middle Eastern countries. And I think India has come out with number of initiatives to connect with these countries. One is the India-Middle East Economic Corridor, and that is because we wanted to ensure that India has constant uninterrupted supply of energy, whatever is requirement. So the third sector, I'm not going in detail, but third very important factor that has brought the India's economic growth is the energy sector. Then, of course, the other political stability, because since the country has been ruled by one political setup for last more than a decade, and we have been constantly following these policies. So these are the major factors that helped India to come out with this 8.2%, and it may grow.
I think it's quite a futuristic vision, if I were to put it that way. It's not just about focusing on the present, but also about taking care of the future. Like, for example, you brought in the point of rare earths and how we are a young country, a young generation, with startups also focused in the area of space exploration. Ambassador Ashok Sajjanhar, could I have a comment from you on this?
Yes, definitely. I think this is a very important element of the tenure of Prime Minister Modi. It is because one would recall giving some macro figures that when Prime Minister Modi assumed charge in 2014, India's economy was the 10th or the 11th as far as the ranking in the global economies is concerned. Today, it has become the fourth largest economy. It has overtaken Japan. It is well on its way to becoming the third largest economy in the next couple of years. And what we have seen is that through this whole process, all these years, Prime Minister Modi has been taking economic reforms. That has been the underlying feature. And the mantra that has been followed by the government is reform, perform, transform. And it is not only, it is before the COVID-19, all these reform of whether it is GST or it is Jan Dhan Yojana, it was the digital public infrastructure, all these, the Startup India, all these programs were introduced before COVID. But even during the period of COVID, the reform programs did not stop. And I think what you mentioned about 8.2% growth in the second quarter, and even before that, it was 7.8%. And while the economies of all the countries, particularly when we see that there is so much of uncertainty, so much of economic, political and geo-economic uncertainty and upheavals that are taking place. In the midst of all that, for India to be fastest growing major economy in the world, I think that is an achievement. And as we have seen, our reform program continues unabated.
In fact, Ambassador Ashok, I'm so glad you brought out a lot of points. For example, the global uncertainty. Let's talk about that. It's as much as about making the economy internally robust as it is about fighting external factors. Now, in the face of tariffs, a lot of nations had to bend backwards and a lot of nations had to give in and negotiate deals that were probably not in their favor. However, India, and particularly speaking in the respect of US, India has been able to maintain its position and has been able to negotiate strong deals. And I'll also follow that up with the FTAs that have come up in the past year. But first, what has helped India maintain that strong stance, especially in the face of so many global headwinds, that we did not lose our rate of growth, we did not fall back, or we had cushions to help our economy stay afloat. So what are your thoughts on that?
We had welcomed President Trump when he came to power in January last year. And we were hopeful that based on our relations with the Trump 1.0, the first Trump administration, that our relations will continue to strengthen. And I think it is in that context that Prime Minister Modi visited the United States, visited Washington, D.C. Within just about a month of President Trump taking over on 12th, 13th of February, he was there. But then after that, we have seen that there has been that huge pressure pressure, coercion on India as far as tariffs are concerned. First, tariffs of 25% imposed on India, then another tariffs of 25% because of Indian imports of Russian oil. Now, you're very right when you say that all the other countries, they have succumbed to the pressure of United States. All of them have capitulated, whether it has been allies of the United States or partners of United States. You look at the European Union, they have a tariff of about 15%. They have been forced to commit that they will be investing about $750 billion, and all of that will be managed by the United States. Similar things with Japan, similar things with South Korea, that huge investments to go into the United States. Even with other countries, developing countries, for instance, Indonesia, 19% tariffs, and that the Indonesian tariffs products will have to face in the United States, but 0% tariffs for the US products going into the Indonesian market. Similarly in Vietnam. But as far as India is concerned, we said that we will have a mutually balanced, a mutually advantageous, which will be a win-win for both. Now that is something that Mr. Trump is not used to. For him, it is a zero-sum game, that I win everything and the other country doesn't win anything. And he is used to going back and announcing that I am the winner, I have come back with this. Now this sort of a thing is, India is a large country, India knows, and we are going back to our heritage, our legacy, our historical, cultural roots, that no one can push us around like this. No one can coerce us like this. So we have stood firm and we have said we'll continue to negotiate without any deadline, but we will not allow the vulnerable sections of our economy, whether it is farmers or it is MSMEs, whether it is in areas of GMOs or dairy products or agriculture. We are willing to look into the justified demands of the United States, and because it's our largest trading partner, we have about $200 billion worth of trade in goods and services. So we are willing to work with them.
Sure.
And we have given them a lot of concessions, access into our market, but we want a balanced deal from them.
Absolutely. Now coming to you, Professor Sanjay. So I'll also bring in the FTAs here. India has been able to negotiate an India-Oman SEPA in December. And there has been an FTA with New Zealand as well recently. Now, as an international relations expert, do you perhaps have another layer to add to India's international relations in the recent times? Especially also looking at India's soft power. Like Ambassador Ashok mentioned a lot of products, for example, dairy. I feel there is a beautiful mutual interdependence that is emerging, as in the world cannot really do without India. As much as India may need others, other countries are also dependent on us for a lot of supplies, for a lot of its trade. So what are your thoughts on that as an international relations expert?
India had multi-aligned approaches, and there I think India has very successfully, first thing, we have been doing regional diplomacy for the global gains. In the regional diplomacy, that we have been working under two policies. One is of course the neighborhood first policy. We try to cultivate all the neighboring countries by different policy measures, like we have developed constructive unilateralisms. Let the neighbors also prosper. Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas. We will work together, and we have extended largest line of credit to any country, that is Bangladesh, around $10 billion. We have also become the partner in crisis while Sri Lanka was going on political and economic upheavals. We have extended about $4.2 billion line of credit, assistance and all that. Even today when there were crisis cyclone, and we have become Sagar Mitra, and we have extended all kinds of commodity and financial support to Sri Lanka. All the countries, Maldives, Nepal, all. So we believe in the policy of the constructive unilateralism. Second, very important policy from where we used to have the bilateral approach while dealing with the neighboring countries, that we have shifted towards the multilateralism, like the initiatives under Act East policy, having tri-nations road connectivity, these Southeast Asian countries, Bangladesh, Myanmar, and extending to Vietnam. But we have also talked about the sub-regional settings like BBIN. That was very important initiatives that Indian government has come up. And also started emphasizing, while the SAARC has been paralyzed by the terrorist acts of Pakistan, we had cultivated, developed an alternate BIMSTEC. We have emphasized on BIMSTEC so we can cooperate. So this is the second very important initiatives that India has taken. Third very important is is with the neighboring countries, we have developed the package deals. Like we are not just going with the zero-sum game. It's like win-win situations that if any country can take some benefits on energy trades, like Nepal can export energy to Bangladesh, India can have the transit corridor through Bangladesh, kind of policies that India had been. So all these policies of India had been non-reciprocal. And I think that has given a very strong message to the world community that we are trying to manage, we are trying to accommodate with the neighboring countries for their development. But because of the internal political developments in neighboring countries, it has become problematic themselves, like in Sri Lanka, like in Nepal, Bangladesh and Pakistan, we have seen. So with the clear-cut objective, with the neighbors and with the extended neighbors, those are three policy objectives that India has. One is, of course, the security, that we are looking forward to have manage the internal security issues. One is, of course, countering terrorism, defying fundamentalism and curbing insurgencies, not only in India, but in South Asia and extended South Asia, including the Middle East and all. The second is that we were looking forward to involve all these countries through economic developments, that Indian policies will not be limited to the India. We will try to bring all the neighboring countries and extended neighbors into our developmental fold. And I think we have come out with different policy initiatives. Already I have mentioned about Act East policy, BIMSTEC, India Middle East Economic Corridor, Project Sagar, and then of course Mahasagar, where Prime Minister Modi has announced in Maldives.
Absolutely. I think you brought out some very important points considering our neighbors and also how a clear message has gone to the world as well. I'd like to bring in Operation Sindhur here. You could anticipate where the conversation was heading now. Now, when that happened back in 2025, the Prime Minister gave a very clear message that blood and water cannot flow together. And I think that also set the international stage that India needs to be taken seriously and we will not back down from a fight. We may not start one, but we will not back down from one either when it comes to that. In fact, I think before we can hear it from you, Ambassador Ashok, let's quickly listen to what the Honorable Prime Minister said while addressing the nation as regards Operation Sindhur.
भारत का मत एकदम स्पष्ट है. टेरर और टॉक एक साथ नहीं हो सकते. टेरर और ट्रेड एक साथ नहीं चल सकते. और पानी और खून भी एक साथ नहीं बह सकता. मैं आज विश्व समुदाय को भी कहूंगा, हमारी घोषित नीति रही है, अगर पाकिस्तान से बात होगी तो टेररिज्म पर ही होगी. अगर पाकिस्तान से बात होगी तो पाक ऑक्युपाइड कश्मीर पीओके उस पर ही होगी.
So, Ambassador Ashok, coming to you now. I'm sure you must have been in the midst of a lot of these political uncertainties and you must have seen a lot of these scenarios up close and personal. What is it like from the inside when, as a country, we have to give a message like that to the world?
Yeah, I think that's a very important phase and that is a very important juncture at which we find our country today. Because I think this has to be compared with what India's response and reaction was after 26/11. I bring you back to 2008.
Absolutely.
When for about 4 days we had 167 of our people killed and we just activated our forces but we did not take any action.
Absolutely.
Now that did not send a message of strength. That did not send a message of resolve and determination. While what we did in Operation Sindhur, and after that, the message from the Prime Minister, as you said, water and blood will not flow together by abrogating the Indus Waters Treaty. And this was something that we have undergone very many wars, very many conflicts, confrontations with Pakistan. But he never took this action. Now this signaled the resolve that India is willing to go to any length to protect its interests. So that was one, and the other was that any act of terrorism will be treated as an act of war. So, this was a message, clear message to our western neighbor, to Pakistan, that any cross-border terror attack in future, we will take it as an act of war, and we will also not differentiate between those actors who are perpetrating these terrorist attacks and their supporters, which is the Pakistan ISI, which is the Pakistan Army, which is the Pakistan establishment, the deep state that is there. So we will take action against all of them also. And very categorically, we also mentioned that we are not going to be pressured by nuclear blackmail. So I think there were a large number of messages, and of course the whole world, barring a few countries like Turkey, Azerbaijan, etc., which stood in for Pakistan, basically the whole world stood with India, saying that India has full right to protect itself, its territorial integrity, its sovereignty. And I think the message was very, very clear. Whatever might have been the narrative that Pakistan and supported by China, what they might have been tried to build in international media and international press. But the serious observers of the situation, it became very clear to them that first we were limiting ourselves only to the terrorist hideouts, whether it was Jaish or Lashkar, Murid ke, Bawalpur, etc. And right in the first night, and we made it very absolutely clear that we are not going out to hit the Pakistan Army establishment, but basically only the terrorist hideout. It's only after Pakistan started hitting out at our defense establishment that we went out, and overnight on 10th of May, we obliterated all their air assets and their airfields. And it was only then that Pakistan came on its knees begging for a ceasefire. Right. Although we had told them on the 7th that now our objective has been achieved. We have completely decimated all the terrorist hideouts. So we are willing to get into a ceasefire. But they had other ideas, and when they saw that India's power was decisive and India's power was so overwhelming that they had no response to it, that they came to us on bended knees asking for a ceasefire. And irrespective of what Mr. Trump might have said after that, or what even China might have stated more recently, that they were involved in mediation of the cessation of hostilities, it is very clear that Pakistan was really brought to its knees, and it's only after they requested for a ceasefire that India agreed to it.
And I think there were a lot of false narratives running around about who won, which side won.
I mentioned about that very
Absolutely.
tangentially. I said irrespective of what is the narratives that might have been going around, but serious observers know what the fact on the ground was.
And I think the Indian delegations that went out to the rest of the countries were particularly helpful in breaking down these false narratives. So a very quick comment, Professor Sanjay, from your side on the delegations that went out to the other countries.
No, definitely. See, we have been victim of terrorism, and I think we have been communicated to the world community that the way the rogue state or the way the terror sponsoring state is promoting and supporting terrorism in India and South Asia, I think that would not limit to India, but it would go beyond that. What is most important is that India has been emphasizing on two issues. One is, of course, the global commons. And in this global commons, terrorism is one of the issues after climate change and all these. And other is the global goods. And I think India has been constantly advocating through different policies and different parameters, like on the definition of Indo-Pacific, where the Americans, they wanted from the Hollywood to Bollywood. But India has tried to include the countries of the West Asia in this Indo-Pacific study, because India is concerned about the rising fundamentalism and terrorism in Pakistan, in Afghanistan, and all these countries. So India emphasized on this even under Quad, where India, because the other powers like the Americans, and they wanted to make it more military oriented, but India had emphasized on that to include non-traditional security issues, where terrorism, climate change, health security, food security, sea and maritime security, all these issues should be part of the larger Indo-Pacific strategy, a part of the free and open Indo-Pacific region and navigational rights and all that. But India's emphasis has always been to focusing more on global commons and global goods, so that India and this voice of India had been liked by a number of the developing countries, and I think India had demonstrated it on different forums and also leading and having dialogues with the global north. So the fight against terrorism, fundamentalism, and talking about the energy security, food security, health security are the topmost priorities of India, so that we can really address the concerns of the developing countries and become the largest and the leading voice of the global south.
Very well, Professor Sanjay. So, as much as I may not want to wind up this conversation because it's taking an exciting turn with every question that I get to ask the both of you, but I will have to because time is on us and the conversation needs to wind up. Now, the last question is about the Prime Minister as a leader himself. He's been addressing parliaments across the world, from the Parliament of Ghana to the Joint Assembly of Trinidad and Tobago. And he's had a historic total of 29 honours bestowed on him. Now, what to you about him as a leader stands out, particularly about his communication style? Because he is not one to mince his words. And I'm sure it must take a lot as a leader to be that charismatic, to be in that power, and to be able to command such a position of respect for India as a country. I'd like to hear it from you, Ambassador Ashok, first, and then I'll come to you, Professor Sanjay.
Yes, thank you very much. I think this is what has really defined India's rise over the last 11 years since Prime Minister Modi took office as the Prime Minister. And I think as far as the foreign policy is concerned, many people, many analysts, many commentators and scholars had doubts that although Prime Minister Modi as the Chief Minister of Gujarat had been eminently successful in the area of managing law and order economy, but his exposure into foreign policy was rather limited. So he might not really be so successful. That might possibly be his weakest suite. But we have seen that foreign policy, in fact, has become one of his strongest suites. In my view, because of his vision, because of his decisiveness, because of his boldness, because of his courage. And I think these are all qualities that he has been able to transmit as far as not only in taking the affairs of the country forward domestically, but also internationally. And what you have mentioned very correctly, 29 awards, meaning that is no small matter. Wherever he goes, he is honored with the highest awards of that particular country. We have seen it during his visit to South America, to the Caribbean, to Africa, now to West Asia. I think what is truly remarkable is all the awards that he has garnered from West Asia, because this was a region which was really, has always stayed away from us. They have always looked at India through the prism of Pakistan, through the prism of Islam, that, we have to be more forthcoming towards the interest of Pakistan because it's a Muslim country. I think Prime Minister Modi, through his policies and through his personal rapport, he has been able to change all that. He connects very well with people. When he is speaking with them, I think he gives them that impression that he is 110% with them and focusing on their interests. So, even as far as the foreign policy is concerned, what we have, whether it is strategic autonomy or multi-alignment, that the interests of all countries are followed, and we have seen that, whether India is the first responder whenever there are any calamities or any challenges that take place, whether it is in the area of vaccine maitri that you had mentioned, that when COVID-19 struck, then India had shared its vaccines with more than 300 million doses with more than 100 countries, right, medicines with more than 150 countries. So I think all of that has made Prime Minister Modi emerge as a leader of the developing world. So I think his voice is heard with keen interest and with great respect the world over.
I think I would keep a decisive approach as the next point, but first comes an inclusive approach for any leader, and I feel that the world is just a reflection of who we are internally. So perhaps it is this inclusive approach that has given our Honourable Prime Minister the respect and the love from the people. Your comments, Professor Sanjay, very quickly.
He has again and again pledged to the people, let's have human-centric approach rather than the state-centric approach of development. And I think that is very decisive. When you talk, you emphasized about the human-centric approach. You are talking about the Manav Kalyan. And I think that welfare of the human being is the primary factors. And that's why Prime Minister Narendra Modi time and again talks that let's have all the conflicts in the world, either the Ukraine or Russia or Middle East, Israel and Palestine and all that. Let's resolve these by the dialogues, by the negotiations, because he is always emphasized about the sustainable peace. And I'm sure that India has got a new identity or new as a soft power or as a cultural power in the world.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us today on Current Affairs, Ambassador Ashok and Professor Sanjay. I think it is to our privilege that we were able to have such an invigorating conversation, and our listeners will have many a takeaway from this one. Once again, thank you so much for joining us on Current Affairs, and wishing both of you a very happy New Year once more.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
In the special series 2025, the Year of Reforms, you were listening to a discussion on India's rise on the world stage. The participants were Ashok Sajjanhar, former ambassador, and Professor Sanjay Kumar Bhardwaj from JNU. The moderator was Niharika, Bhuwania. This program was produced and presented by the News Services Division of Akashvani. You can listen to it on our mobile app, News on AIR. This program is also available on our YouTube channel, News on AIR Official.
Current Affairs.